So back in December 2017, the Walt Disney Company first announced plans to purchase 21st Century Fox. Eventually, after all was said and done, after plenty of legal hurdles spanning many international commissions, and $21.3 billion later, on March 20th, 2019, Fox was fully acquired into the House of Mouse. And sure, all those legal hurdles were allowing one massive corporation to have an even larger global footprint than it already did, and all those pesky antitrust suits, but hey, think of all the cool things we got out of it. Fox properties can now appear at the Disney parks.
We're going to Disney World!
Even though the Avatar area Disney World began in 2014 and finished in May of 2017, before the merger was even announced. But hey, they also got the distribution rights to the Star Wars original and prequel trilogy, so we can get them in Ultra 4K HD Blu-ray editions. Just, not the pre-special editions, of course, but, that's still fine. But the one thing everyone was talking about that made fans trust this potential corporate trust issue was the excitement that we could finally get the X-Men in the MCU. I mean, think about what the MCU looked like at the time of this deal. It was first announced between Thor Ragnarok and Black Panther, but the deal was finalized between Captain Marvel and Endgame. The MCU was at its height in terms of cultural impact, and the hype for what came next was real. And then the world kind of ended in 2020 for a bit there, and the entire Phase 4 happened. And the only mentions of any kind of former 21st Century Fox property was that stinger at the end of Miss Marvel.
Like a mutation.
That one joke in She-Hulk.
Oh, and when are we getting the X-Men?
The fan cast of Mr. Fantastic. And that's about it. You would assume WandaVision, which featured a major character from the X-Men's, which kicked off Phase 4, would have, anything in it, but we got bait and switch for a boner joke.
You're Ralph Boner? No, don't laugh at that.
But hey, Wolverine is coming eventually. But before we get into how I believe the X-Men will be brought into the MCU, let's hear a word from our sponsor. Me. So, this is my first video jumping into the YouTube space, and I have so much more to talk about. All the things comic books, all things pop culture, video games, nerd stuff, you name it. So please, like, comment, subscribe down below, and all that good stuff. Every little bit's gonna help, and hopefully I can create something that, you guys will enjoy. So, without further ado, let's throw my hat into this already not crowded space of YouTubers talking nerd stuff. Let's go. Currently, there's only 2, technically 3 projects in the pipeline that involve Fox properties. Deadpool 3, Fantastic Four, and kind of the Marvels. Almost nothing is known about Fantastic Four, not even casting choices, so at this point it's really pointless to speculate. But with Miss Marvel being a mutant, that's uncharted territory. She was an Inhuman in the comic books, but with some karmic justice, she's part Jinn and part mutant in the MCU. The trailers actually don't tell us too much, and what they do show, I kind of get the feeling that, they're just making up some beats for the trailer. Like, Nick Fury hanging out back in space after his own miniseries is scheduled to air. I'm just saying, Secret Invasion gives off some real Last Ride vibes to me.
One last fight.
He's not coming back.
But the Marvels seems to be building towards the continued Kree-Skrull War. I mean, they could bring in some of the intergalactic X-Men villains like Mojo and the Phalanx, but I doubt they do anything that major. Although, actress Zawe Ashton is playing Dar-Ben, seen in this shot right here, carrying the hammer, just like Ronan the Accuser. But, if I'm being honest, that character is a deep cut from the comics, and is only really known for being the co-emperor that was assassinated by Empress Deathbird of the Shi'ar Empire, which kinda does bring an end to the Kree-Skrull Wars in the comics. Kinda. The film is packed already. There's enough intergalactic stuff going on to carry an entire film and then some. I just think she'd be the better choice since she's both an X-Men and Miss Marvel villain. Who knows, maybe they'll reference Kamala Khan's X-Gene in the film, maybe they'll save it for the end credits scene, who knows, we'll see. But what we do actually know a surprising lot of information about is the long-awaited return of Deadpool.
I know, right?
Deadpool 3 at the time of this video is in pre-production. Deadpool is back, rated R, and finally giving us Hugh Jackman's Wolverine again.
Hey Hugh, you want to play Wolverine one more time?
Yeah, sure, Ryan.
But to top it all off, it's officially MCU canon. Stefan Kapusik and Morena Baccarin will be back as Colossus and Vanessa, Karine Sony as Dopinder, and Leslie Uggams as Blind Al will also be back, and Sean Levy of other films starring Ryan Reynolds, Free Guy, and The Adam Project will direct. We still don't know the synopsis of the film yet, but Ryan Reynolds did say on Twitter a while ago that pre-merger, the film was actually going to be a Rashomon-style road trip with Deadpool and Logan.
You like Rashomon?
That's not how I remember it.
But there are some casting choices that I feel gives a pretty good indication of where the film is going and where it could be setting up things for the X-Men later on down the road. And that's with Emma Corrin, who won the Golden Globe as Princess Diana in The Crown, but also the absolute acting phenom that is Matthew McFadden. Those are two massively talented actors who could carry the franchise moving forward. We just don't know who they're playing yet. But because comic book YouTube loves prediction videos, here's my hypothesis and supporting argument, before everyone else comes to the exact same conclusion and I seem like the copycat. There aren't too many good villains to pick from that the Fox X-Men films haven't already touched on. Senator Kelly, Magneto and the Brotherhood of Mutants, William Stryker, the Dark Phoenix, Silver Samurai, Sebastian Shaw and the Hellfire Club, Boulevard Trask and the Sentinels, Apocalypse, and of course, Dark Phoenix again. And while I think they could start introducing some of the weirder villains like the Morlocks in a Deadpool movie, I doubt they'd do that as the first MCU entry when they've got so much more to unpack. I mean, sure, Deadpool could actually just hand-wave all of that away, but still.
God, that's lazy writing.
I believe that they're finally going to pull the trigger on the villain that can only properly be done in a rated-R film. Mr. Sinister. It only took teasing him in X-Men Apocalypse, New Mutants, and Deadpool 2, but hey, I think this could be the time where we're finally going to get him. In case you don't know, Nathaniel Essex was a scholar in Victorian London. He was a contemporary of Charles Darwin, the real life guy who popularized the evolutionary biology and that branched pattern of evolution stems from natural selection of random mutations, just like the X-Men. But Essex took the wrong impression from the survival of the fittest part of Darwin's works, so he was expelled from the Royal Society because his work was too questionable. And due to some time travel nonsense, Cyclops and Jean Grey show up trying to stop Apocalypse, but warns Mr. Sinister that he might someday destroy the world. So what does any supervillain with a weird, goofy rhyming name do when he finds out information like that? He starts kidnapping and experimenting on people before he murders them, mutilates the body of his dead son, and is directly responsible for the death of his wife, who in his final breath calls him Sinister. I somehow remember all of this from the 90s animated cartoons, because cartoons were something else back in the day, man, I swear. Later, Mr. Sinister teams up with Apocalypse, who uses the same technology that the Celestials used to create the Eternals to functionally turn him immortal. And due to some more time-traveling nonsense to stop Mr. Sinister, but this time with Gambit and some totally unknown, random shape-shifting mutant, Mr. Sinister steals that guy's power, so now he can heal, control every part of his body, and of course, shapeshift. And later, Mr. Sinister becomes the teacher of the High Evolutionary, who we'll see later on in Guardians of the Galaxy 3, which brings us back to Deadpool 3 and Mr. Sinister. Since the movie is very firmly Deadpool 3 and not named anything else, it's safe to assume that it's going to take place directly after the events of the second. All that time travel shenanigans firmly intact. There's actually rumors that Owen Wilson's Mobius and the TVA are actually going to appear in this film as a fun way to at least bring in Wade Wilson and Logan over to the MCU. So hear me out on my best guess from what we know so far. Deadpool's going nuts traveling through time, and he's trying to find Logan.
Huh? But one day, your old pal Wade's gonna ask you to get back in the saddle again.
Wade could travel through time, but I think he might be the one to accidentally inspire Nathaniel Essex, played by Matthew McFadden.
And, you.
And spills the beans on all the mutants. He bounces around time for a bit and finally finds the version of Wolverine that we'll see in the MCU. And that's when the TVA arrests the two. I think Mobius could probably let them off to go set things right because he had a hunch just like he did with Loki. And I mean, what's the worst that could happen? There couldn't be anyone more chaotic than the God of Chaos, could there?
The bad lady, preferably.
So they go back, big second act fight that they think they won, and that's when Mr. Sinister either gets Wade or Logan's blood.
Are you there, God? It's me, Margaret.
Since both of them have healing powers and so much more plot critical than this guy. So with all of Deadpool's time traveling, creating a whole new multiverse with each and every single time, and him doing it countless times, and currently the multiverse looking like this, the TVA doesn't know where to put them, so our fourth wall breaking Merc with the mouth just says, hey, just drop us off in Earth 1999-99. But since they're still technically connected to the X-Men timelines, it would technically create an incursion, just like was warned about in Doctor Strange the Multiverse of Madness.
Well, I can see why you guys were so worried about incursions.
And with all the timey-wimey branches in the timeline, incursions, multiverses colliding, and all that other nonsense, I still think this might end up being the best way to bring the X-Men into the MCU. But if you think about it, this is the biggest plot problem that the writers and Kevin Feige have been losing sleep over. If you do the they've always been here, just hidden story, that leaves a huge plot hole as why Doctor Strange didn't call them for Endgame. I mean, you mean to tell me that he would call in Howard the freaking Duck before Professor Xavier? No. And if you go with a multiversal invader storyline where all the mutants just suddenly jump through a portal and now they're all here.
He just opened a portal and walked through.
Yeah, kinda.
And I really hate to say it, but that kind of would justify all the hatred for the mutants, because they would actually be invaders whose very existence would cause
one hell of an incursion
and cause everyone to die. And if you have the X gene be created by the snap or multiversal energy or what have you, that would ruin so many great stories like Magneto being a Holocaust survivor or Logan fighting in every single war since the 1800s. And yeah, there is a sliding timeline where you can just shift it around and say Punisher actually fought in this war. It was actually these people who kidnapped Tony Stark. But then there's characters like Magneto who are very specifically Holocaust survivors, and it would be a huge disservice to not only them, but the real-world survivors if you changed any of his storyline up. But in my idea, the incursion still technically happens on the timeline, just early enough that you make Mr. Sinister the first mutant in the MCU timeline. Sorry, Apocalypse. But the effects wouldn't be felt in the MCU until the moment the multiversal starts going all this. It still keeps the mutants out of the Battle of Endgame that we, the audience, saw in the theaters in 2019. It will just obviously happen differently in this new version of the MCU timeline. Maybe this time Matt Murdock would have showed up to the battle.
I'm Daredevil.
Who?
This is now a technically different, but not by that much, timeline. It still tracks with Kamala Khan being a mutant, since we know that the show happened after this. But this does almost go back to my problem with the multiversal invader storyline. With not too many films or shows still left in Phase 5 to talk about how the multiverse is still in whack, this might not actually be a plot hole, but a plot point. I mean, there's only Loki, What If, and very possibly maybe Agatha. Deadpool 3 kicks off Phase 6 in style, and the multiversal spanning problems that could lead us into the Fantastic Four and the next Avengers film. But yeah, that's just my thoughts on how to fit the mutants in the MCU. What about you guys? I'd love to read your comments down below. And yeah, this is my very first video, so do all that stuff the algorithm loves. Please do that. I've been Eric, and you have been awesome.